cricket lease, item 20, and then deal with perhaps the Riccarton Wigram Community Board so that some of the people here can get on with their normal lives. Yeah.
I think just about all the cricket people have left, and there's other people that have been waiting. Is it really necessary, given that it will probably take some time?
I think there are still cricket people in the audience, aren't there? It's not. It's not. Okay. Okay, let's deal with that one. Have we got our legal people here? We have. Sorry, Robert. Yep. And John. Okay. Just in case there's any questions. Okay, so I've gone to item number 20, part A. That's the report of the Chairperson of the Finance Committee. It should actually be the committee, I think. So it's moved Andrew and seconded Ali. Right. So can I put that, or are there any questions or comments? Yanni, then Andrew.
Thank you. Staff, given, I just wanted to check in terms of the lease. My understanding is that this is a change to the lease. There's no provision in the lease for us to be able to assign the lease.
What's proposed is an assignment of the lease, so a change in identity of the tenant. There are no changes to the lease itself. The reason that council's consent is required is because the lease says council's consent is required.
Where does it say that in the lease?
That's the effect of clause 8.
Right. Clause 8.
Right.
It doesn't. I don't see where it says that. What I have, it says that the lessee shall not at any time during the term transfer, assign, mortgage, charge, or otherwise part with the possession of the premise.
That's the effect of clause 8. That effectively means if they wish to do that, it requires the council's consent.
Right. Okay.
Okay. And the second question I have is, we've had a letter raising a number of alleged breaches of the resource consent. Have you got confidence that in accordance with the lease, all the consenting statutory requirements have been adhered to?
I haven't been asked to look at that.
Who's responsible for monitoring that, and is it something that we can follow up?
Yeah, I can probably give an answer to that, Councillor Johansson. There are a number of alleged breaches of the resource consent during the construction of the pavilion. All of those went to Council's inspections and enforcement team and were dealt with accordingly. I think there have been a couple of grumpy letters. There's been one fine, but due process has been followed, and the project is on track and fully compliant at this stage.
Just wanted to check, it seems like we have a bit of an unusual situation. Have you seen the funding agreements that are driving this change?
I haven't seen funding agreements. They are between the trust and the funders. What I have seen is confirmation from the funders that they are fully committed to the project, and confirmation that they have and they will deliver on the funding promises that they made.
So what assurance can we have that the funding agreements are not contrary to the provisions of the permitted use that's in our lease if we haven't seen them?
Well, it's almost irrelevant in a sense, because the council's control is through the terms of the lease, and the tenant must comply with the terms of the lease. They must deliver what the lease provides that they deliver. If they have extraneous or alternative arrangements with third parties that say something else, that's not our concern, because we have the assurance and control through the lease.
But in terms of the funding, that very much is our concern, because we weren't going to sign the lease until the funding had been secured. It now appears the funding's been secured on a set of conditions that it could be, and we can't verify it, different to what our lease permits.
The lease permits, the permitted use in the lease remains. That doesn't change. So What I'm saying is that term is consistent, that is not changing. The permitted use remains the same, irrespective of what is in a funding agreement or any other arrangement that the tenant may have. The tenant must only comply, or must still comply with the terms of the lease. We're not being asked to vary that, we're not being asked to change it. We still have that assurance and control because that provision is not changing.
So how can you be assured that they have the funding to do the project if you haven't cited the funding agreements and you don't know whether it's different to what's permitted in the lease?
Now, the evidence was provided at the time of the funding. That was provided in detail to the acting chief executive at the time, and evidence was found. The evidence of funding was found to be satisfactory.
But we've just heard that you haven't actually cited the funding agreements.
We have cited
A respectful point of order.
No, it's all right. I'm going to let him answer that, and then we're going to answer.
It's actually got nothing to do with the substantive, though.
No.
It
He's
does.
a
It has
councillor.
everything
He's
to do
welcome to
with
ask
substantive.
questions, Jamie.
On the substantive.
Yeah. He's
This is about
he's
the
okay.
lease.
He's
This
within
is a
standing orders.
formality about Canterbury
No,
Cricket
he's within
assigning the
standing
lease to the
orders
trust.
at the moment. Yep.
We have cited the commitments made by the funders. We have cited their letters, their promises. They are not asking for anything different. They are asking that the trust, who are the receivers of the fund, have a greater level of ownership of the pavilion. So nothing has changed in the requirements of the funders, only that that the Canterbury Cricket Trust have a greater deal of ownership. And to that extent, we have seen all the promises. We've had them looked at from with a legal set of eyes, and really nothing has changed, either the lease or the intentions of the funders. And we would probably be creating ourselves a lot of unnecessary work and a lot of going into territory we don't really want to go into, poring over agreements between two third parties that don't really impact on us. We really don't want to do that.
Thank you. No. I'm going to other questions now, Yanni. Ali, and then Andrew.
Look, I would normally call a point of order there too, but I do think that Yanni has got a point, and I don't want to labour it any further. Can I just succinctly ask you then, you are confident that the agreements that have been reached between the organisation and the third parties don't in any way breach the lease agreement between Canterbury Cricket and the council? That's it in a nutshell, isn't it, Yanni? Because I think what Councillor Johansson is saying is, without knowing what is in those agreements in the third party, you are taking on their word that there is nothing in those that breaches the lease between Cricket and the council. So that's why I just asked that again.
Councillor Jones, yes, I'm confident because I've heard absolutely nothing to the contrary, and we have been working very, very closely with all the parties through the process. And just to reiterate, we have absolute control through the lease of what can and can't happen there.
And you'll be monitoring that, John, will you?
Yes, we are, closely.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Andrew.
As a result of the deputation from Hands-Off Hagley, I just wanted to ask a legal point of clarification. It was suggested in that deputation that this item represents an opportunity to look at changing some aspects of the lease or renegotiating the lease. My understanding as a non-legal person would be that we can't unilaterally make changes to the lease. That would require negotiation at any time and also at this time. But I think it would be useful just to get some legal comment, both for councillors and for the people making the deputation, to clarify the position around that.
Thanks, Andrew.
What you've said, Councillor, is correct. Any changes to the lease would require a negotiation and agreement. I guess if you were looking at this purely, you could agree with Hands-Off Hagley, because we are being asked to give consent to an assignment, which we don't have to do. We could, if we wish to, be hard-nosed about matters, perhaps use that as a lever if we wish to negotiate changes if we thought they were appropriate. But as you said, those changes could only be made by mutual agreement.
Okay, thank you. Glenn was next, then Phil.
Thank you. This could be either way off beam or pertinent, but I'd like to ask the question anyway. In Cricket World Cup 2015 was approved as the major event organiser in December 2013. That was replaced in that role in 2014 by ICC development. Now that's not referred to in 13.1 in the letter from the Trust to the Council. So my question is, does that concern you, and shouldn't that actually be the case? That does have, there was a legislative change to that end.
Councillor Livingston, the ICC, International Cricket Council, own the worldwide rights for the tournament. They create a company, one in New Zealand and one in Australia, Cricket World Cup Limited, to operate the tournament in each of those countries. Absolutely nothing has changed. All of Council's agreements regarding the Cricket World Cup are with Cricket World Cup Limited. So nothing's really changed there.
Okay, I do wonder about that though, because ICC is now listed as, or now is by law, the major event organiser, and there's quite a difference in terms of tax.
Firstly, I'd say, just to reiterate, ICC own the event. I won't repeat what I've just said. Also, the Cricket World Cup is not concerned at all, is not really relevant with the assignment or not of a lease for the pavilion. It's kind of two separate things.
That's true. Okay, Phil.
I'm just wondering, clearly though there's a flow-on effect in terms of some of these things, and Hands Off Hagley had said, and like, I realise this is a lease which in effect is like being rolled over, but I've no background knowledge of some, and I just really want to ask, because Hands Off Hagley said, look, that it was like they didn't use the term peppercorn lease, but it was $1,200 each year, that was the lease?
Yep.
And that council also maintained the Oval at a cost of about $300,000 a year?
Yep.
So then they also made the point, look, is it council's role to actually subsidise like a professional organisation? And I just wonder if you would comment on that.
No, thank you for that question. It's very pertinent. Council lease a small area of ground. That's what the lease covers, and it is over to the cricket community through their vehicle to design, build, own and operate a pavilion on there. And the advantages for council is they don't have to contribute to the design, the ownership or the maintenance. It is operated on there. Council operates the Hagley Oval Cricket Ground and has complete control over that. It can hire it out to whoever it wants at any time. It has complete control on when it's fenced and when it's not. And the council will hire it for all sorts of events, all sorts of purposes, irrespective of what's going on in the pavilion. And that's our right. To maintain the Hagley Oval, yes, it costs about $300,000 a year. And we're doing it at Hagley Oval now, where we used to do it at QE2 Park and Lancaster Park. From time to time, council will charge the cricket community a lot more than $1,200 a year to use those facilities. For a first-class game, it's about $1,800 a day. For a bigger event, like a test or a one-dayer, it will be an awful lot more than that, depending on the nature of the game. The council keeps those revenues. This is in line very much with council's leasing policy with all other sports facilities, be they Mainland Football Park, be they hockey at Nunweek Park. The council leases the ground for a very reasonable rent and empowers the sporting code to build, own and operate the facilities on there. That, if you like, avoids council having to take on that financial burden, a burden that to date it really hasn't wanted to take on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Pauline? You're fine. Okay. Is that all the questions, guys? Okay, one more?
I just wanted to understand that we've got this facility. We haven't seen the obligations. If you look at 177, 13.2, 13.3, we haven't cited the documents behind that. But I really just wanted to ask you whether you've considered any other changes to the lease based on the fact that it seems to be, we've got this, we've got this facility in place now, the pavilion's there, and the potential for it to have wider use than what's permitted in the lease in terms of other functions. So have you thought about whether there's an appropriate change that might be made to enable the community to actually access this facility in light of the funding agreements, which, I mean, I haven't seen, you haven't seen, but you've had some understanding of what they are?
No, the question is quite fair because the question is about who can use the pavilion, and there is a requirement under the Earthquake Recovery Grant to actually allow the community to use that for the next, I think, 6 years or 5 years. No, but it's a fair question because this is going to be important.
With respect, though, it's a fair question outside of this forum. If it was a workshop and we
No,
with
sorry,
people,
I'm in
sure.
charge. It is a fair question.
But it has nothing to do with substantive because
No, this is the only chance that these guys are going to get to be able to make this available for the community. It's an issue that was raised by Hansel Hagley. It is an issue also of concern to who can use the pavilion now there from the cricket people as well.
But
So
what,
it would
but
be
what
helpful.
we're debating
No,
is,
Jamie,
do we
I'm
assign a
sorry.
lease
I'm sorry.
from Canterbury
We will
Cricket
debate
to
that
the-
in a minute. Yanni's asking his last question, and it is covered in here. So could we have an answer
Yep.
to the question, which is who can currently make use of the pavilion under the terms of the lease? Is it confined to sporting codes, or given the rather lovely function room that's there, can any community group book that function room?
Yeah. Firstly, have we considered changing the terms of the lease? No, we haven't. Because the terms of the lease inherently provide for sort of community and other use, as long as it's consistent with the resource consent and the Reserves Act. So that use is permitted.
It is permitted now.
It is permitted.
Right.
Council granted that lease knowing the design of the building, the size of the building, and the intended
Okay.
use.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. So it is permitted for
Yes, it is.
community to use that facility.
Yep.
There is not going to, somebody's not going to come back and say, you're not a sporting group. Okay.
And I know two of the most significant funders, the Lion Foundation.
No, we're fine. We're fine.
Lovely.
Okay, thank you. Just debate on the subject. No more questions.
Would the costs charged for community use be prohibitive for them to access it, or?
No, there is a provision in their grant that makes them available to the community. Am I?
I know the Prime Minister's Earthquake Appeal Trust and the Lion Foundation have insisted that the costs enable access by community groups.
Thank you.
Right, okay, I really am on debate now. Is there any debate on this before I put it? If not, right, Yanni, then Glenn. Just remember, guys, you've got a 3-minute speaking limit.
Yeah. I just wanted to be clear because, I think I can understand why the need to assign the lease is being requested. I do find it incredibly hard for us as councillors to make good decisions when we don't get copies of the source documents. And I do want to draw councillors' attention to page 177 and clauses 13.2 and 13.3. The reason that we're being asked to do this is for the Trust to meet its obligations to its funders and for the Trust to comply with its funder requirements. And I do find it hard to make good decisions when we don't actually see direct evidence of what those requirements are. So I think I certainly would like us to get copies of that to ensure that those agreements are consistent with the lease. What I've been told in terms of the use is that this lease is for recreation reserved to a sports organisation, and the permitted use under the lease is limited effectively to sporting activity. So I just want to say that that's the advice from our legal people We've heard different advice from our staff today over community groups being able to access it, and this is why I'm raising these concerns. I actually think the issue now for us is that we've got a facility there. It's not going to be taken away. It's not going to be demolished. Actually, how do you get the best use out of the facility that's there in a way that's fair for people in sports and people in the community? And I actually really think there needs to be some more work done around it, given the two different things that we've heard over who can actually use it. So I'm not prepared to support this today. I would actually like us to get a fuller report back with, and if it has to be in PX, so be it, with what the specific funding requirements are, so that we know that we can have a lease that even if it's assigned, we can actually make other changes to it to enable the best use of this facility. That should be our goal, the best use of in terms of access, in terms of affordability, and in terms of the wider community, given that this is a pavilion that's been built in Hagley Park. I also think that at some stage we do need to get a report back on the issues around the funding and the issues around the resource consent, because we've had a number of allegations that have been made. We've even got evidence today under point 7 that the 1.4 million of the 3 million has been raised. So that calls into question the whole issue of the underwrite. It calls into the whole question of us signing a lease that funding was confirmed when we're actually being told that the funding is still incomplete. So there's wider issues here, and I cannot support this today. I would like to propose that we do defer this subject to citing the funding agreements.
Thank you. If we assemble some of the facts, it's a $1,200 lease. This is costing the council $300,000 a year, and when the transfer of the organisational role was made to the ICC through legislation, that's a company incorporated under the laws of the British Virgin Islands, a tax haven. So it comes back to us. We might well agree on this today, I'm not sure, but in terms of our values, is this what we want as a council? Is that cricket? Especially with what's going on in the city at the moment, that we're effectively becoming a vehicle through this lease bound by time and space, a haven, for those participating in the game. I may well vote for this, but I think it's important to tease out all these questions.
Please say that I think some of us are missing the point here. This is about transferring a lease to an organisation. This is not about relitigating issues that, to be perfectly frank, should have been sorted out months and months and months, if not years ago. So I think we're getting our priorities wrong here. I'm not dismissing the concerns and the questions that Glenn and Yanni have suggested, but what concerns me greatly is that these questions and issues are being raised now with questions being asked at a point when they should have been addressed and raised months and months ago. So if you don't support this today, I think you might be getting your priorities wrong, and you're basing that decision on something that should have been sorted a very long time ago.
Yeah, it's that this item lie on the table until such time as further information is provided.
I'd like to ask our legal counsel, Robert O'Connor, to speak to that. And the question is this time critical today to make a decision as requested in the report?
The advice that I've had from Lee Robinson, who's the chair of the trust, is that this is required to enable the funds to flow from the donors to allow the bills to be paid for the construction work that's been completed. And so it is time critical that a decision is made today, because if that's not done, then that will cause the trust difficulty in meeting its financial commitments.
How long has the current lease got to run? Just approximately.
It's 5 years. No, sorry, 33 years is the Standard Reserves Act term.
Yeah, how far into it are we?
It commenced on the 31st of December 2013.
32 years.
Could they assign the lease and still ask to go back?
I just wanted the item to lie on the table until such time as further information is made available in regards to the specific funding requirements associated with the transfer or associated with the need to reassign the lease. And can I just also just, I mean, given what staff have said, well, yeah, no, it's a really important question. Is when were the funding agreements requirements made aware to you that the lease was incompatible with? Because we've heard that this is time sensitive. I've heard from some councillors that this should have been sorted months ago. I was only aware of this last week when it came to the Finance Committee. When were you aware that the funding requirements required us to reassign the lease?
Because the Cricket Trust is the fundraiser, and the fundraiser must be the holder of the lease. That's the only orders.
June or July?
Yeah.
With regards to this request at seeing the funding details from this organisation, do we ask that kind of thing from Canterbury Rugby or netball or volleyball or any other organisations? So when we're discussing a lease or changes to lease or obligations, do we say to them that we want to cite or must cite all their funding applications and the agreements per se of those?
No,
Thank you.
not,
No,
not unless we've got a specific reason to do so, but no.
Hanson, seconded councillor Clearwater. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. I declare that lost. Can we go back to the original motion, which is moved councillor Turner, seconded councillor Jones? Can I put that now? No debate. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Carried. Do you want your vote recorded against it? Yanni's vote recorded against. Okay, thank you. We've done one item.